Hello, everybody. Thank you, colleagues from near and far, for joining us today to explore together the concept of sustainability. And today we're going to be looking at sustainable pedagogy in early childhood and beyond. So welcome to Childhood and Society SIG at Middlesex University. It's been running for a long time now, and this is our 2025 presentation series, the second one of the year. And I'm really excited to be working and presenting today with two esteemed colleagues who will introduce themselves now. Diane, do you want to pop on and say hello?
Hi, yes, I am Diane Boyd. Currently, I am working with the Department of Education through the Stronger Hub, Liverpool City region and beyond, delivering sustainability through training and many different types of events.
Kerrie?
Hi, so I'm Kerrie Lee. I'm a lecturer at the University of Hull and a director of students' experience. And I've been very fortunate over the last few years to work closely with Diane and Angela on our ideas that we appear to share, and we like to celebrate with everybody else going forward.
Okay, and I'm Dr. Angela Scollan from Middlesex University, Associate Lecturer in Early Childhood. I'm proud to say I started off as an NNEB back in the 90s, so there's sustainability for you. So we've got colleagues from a real breadth of the world here today, colleagues from Georgia, colleagues from Scotland, and colleagues from all over England. And if there's any other countries, Kerrie, Diane, if you can see on the chat.
Wales, I see Glenda's there from Wales.
Oh, fabulous, Wales, that's amazing. So it's sustainability is global, so it's there for us all. So just to share with you, Diane and Kerrie and myself and some other colleagues on the Early Childhood Studies degree network in our sustainability group, and Naomi McLeod as well. We've all been working on sustainability together for a long, over 5-6 years, I think. So we've been looking at sustainability and breaking down the concept of it. And we've been sharing our research and our findings over the last couple of years. And we've been really proud to say we're working on a project at the moment to do with Play Matters, and we're writing about sustainable play. We've written about wisdom shepherds and about children who are sharing and leading on sustainability, but are us adults listening. We've been engaging with sustainable pedagogy, sustainable play, and we've engaged with resource packs that have gone global, and we've presented at ISERA as well. So just kind of to give you an overview of our dedication to sustainability and our interest, and we're hoping to explore it a little bit with you today. We're trying to fit in as much as we can, but not to be too much, so that there's time for us all to engage and talk about the challenges of sustainability when we think about policy and theory translating into practice. So just a few housekeepings. Please turn your cameras, your audio off, so that there's no interruption. I think, yeah, thank you very much. And so the Childhood and Society SIG presents sustainability today, looking at the pedagogy of sustainability. We're going to now introduce the aims and the objectives. We're going to be thinking about the concept of sustainability and the many characteristics and the many traits that's associated with it. Because when we talk about sustainability, what do we mean? And I know that's going to open a dialogue that could probably last a couple of hours. What is sustainable? Is it the resources? Is it the practice? Is it the pedagogy? Is it what we're doing? Is it how we're doing it? So we want to think about sustainability, and it's defined today with us, so you get where we're coming from, as a way of thinking, of doing and planning about what it is that we're doing today, and how it will impact on tomorrow. And are we thinking about sustainability with the resources that we're using? Can the resources that we have last forever? If they can, how? And if they can't, why not? And where is our engagement with sustainability when we bring it into the lens of early childhood? We're really kind of thinking about how we're actively engaging with sustainability and understanding it. And when we're talking about the concept of sustainability, what is it exactly that we're talking about? We won't be able to answer all of those questions today, but we really want to think about two main things. We want to think about challenges related to sustainability when they're translating between policy and practice. And we want to think about the intersections when we look at sustainability regarding the Sustainable Development Goals, the 3 pillars of sustainability, and the pedagogy that we're using in early childhood and beyond to engage with the concept. So that's kind of where we are today. And again, we've got environmental as one of our pillars, economical as the second pillar, and social culture as our third pillar. So handing over now to Kerrie and Diane for us to explore this together. And please do use the chat. Please do write your reflections and your questions down, and we really look forward to engaging with them at the end.
So Diane, are you there?
Diane, can't hear you.
Angela, I've muted. Angela had mentioned the 3 pillars. There are 2 aspects when we talk about sustainability from a policy perspective, and it is the 3 pillars of sustainability, which originally were social, environmental, and economic. But it became a sort of an understanding that you can't talk about society, social, without actually highlighting that there is culture has got to be embedded into that, because culture is very important, and especially from an early childhood perspective. So we've got the 3 pillars of sustainability, which came through the Brundtland report in 1987. And then we have got the very beautiful visuals of the 17 Sustainable Development Goals, which came as a result of the Paris Treaty in 2015, where 196 countries signed up for this blueprint to ensure that the developing and the developed world is working towards all of these 17 goals. But that then leads to challenges, which we will discuss now. So I'll hand you over to Kerrie.
So Diane has introduced the ideas of the policy. We now have the practice. And I believe, Angela, were you going to explore this a little further?
Yeah, looking at the challenges and regarding sustainability, when we look at the SDGs, there's 17 of them. When we look at the 3 pillars, and there are more pillars that we could kind of maybe create together as a group, which might be something for us to think about later. But actually, how do the pillars and the SDGs and the concept and the understanding of sustainability, how do they clash and collide? How do they represent themselves in our practice, in our everyday lives? We are thinking of children's rights, the UNCRC, a rights-based perspective, social justice, empowering children, empowering ourselves, empowering the sector. But how are we doing that? And where does sustainability link and fall into these everyday kind of thoughts and discussions and practices that we need to be having? So we're talking about quality education that ensures that practitioners and students are tuned in to what children are talking about, what they're sharing with us about their lived realities, what children know about sustainability. Is it our environment? Is it our language? Is it the way that we're working with children that is enabling them to express themselves? And are we enabling ourselves to hear what children are sharing with us about sustainability? So there's so many challenges. We can't present them all today, but we want to be provocative with you to be thinking about, you know, these aspects in your own context. Okay.
So this idea of the policy and the practice colliding, as Angela has said, we started with this idea that, unfortunately, when people want to look at ideas that are new and exciting, we often think of a deficit, and that was something we didn't want to do. We didn't want to have a deficit of early childhood. We know we have quality educators. We know we have quality training. We know we have quality settings out there. So we didn't want to be one of these people or groups that will walk in and go, right, we're going to tell you how to do this. We wanted to look at what was actually happening and then seeing if it links to the policy. So this is where the collisions begin. So it's this idea of this discourse, you know, the theory versus reality. And in the Sustainable Development Goals, a lot of the targets and the indicators are very interlinking. And one of the ones that brings forward is this idea that we should have sustainabilities embedded, linked throughout all educational policy, curriculum, training and practice. But then we became questioning, well, is that a reality? How often have people heard of the Sustainable Development Goals? And again, why haven't they heard of them? Is it one of those things that we know we do it, but we haven't got the title, we haven't got the emphasis on it going forward? So when we began looking and speaking to practitioners from both the universities, from Middlesex and from Hull, and speaking to practitioners at a variety of conferences, we began with this question of, actually, do you know what the SDGs are? Okay, you might not know what the SDGs are, but what are you doing in your practice? And then can we see that the label is there, that it's linked there, or is it embedded throughout as being advocated for the Sustainable Development Goals? So we started to look at the ideas of early childhood. We started to look at how it links together. And there's this wonderful image that Diane put together with the Stronger Hubs that she's working with that starts to combine these ideas to give a visual, because the original visuals maybe don't appear to link to early childhood going forward. And it's this idea of sustainability and sustainable pedagogy. It is interrelated. It is interconnected. They are already doing it. It may just be that it needs an extension or an enhancement to truly reflect the constant change of sustainability. Sustainability has to be sustainable through changes going forward. And that is often the difficult. We know in early years that there are constant changes, that there have been a high number of changes over a very short period of time. So it's getting this idea forward of your own practice, to be able to reflect on it, to be able to look forward and see what's happening and what is going forward. So we developed this idea of the sustainable pedagogy, and we have this quote here, as you can see, that we decided, we linked a lot of powerful words together that we thought told the story. So it's holistic, it's interconnected, it draws all aspects of sustainability. This was something else that we discovered as we begun to research this idea, that sustainability, people often only thought of it as the environmental, that it was, well, yes, we play outside, or yes, we've maybe mentioned climate change, which is fantastic. That's exactly what we want. But what else is there? What else can be there to be the sustainable? And linking to the early years, the ideas of experiential learning, the co-construction of knowledge and research. You see the image in the corner up there. I'm also a forest school lead. And one of the things we tried to do was this intergenerational. So how can we pass on knowledge and support all age ranges? As you can see on there, yes, there's early years child there, but there's also older children. And it's that shared understanding going backwards and forwards. So the older child learns from the younger child and vice versa. And this passing, this sharing, this exploring, this co-constructing going forward. And with this idea of sustainable pedagogy, it enhances what is happening. It enhances what we want to do going forward. So Angela, if you want to talk about the intersection.
Yeah, so here we've kind of produced a kind of a visual, really. We were trying to manage sustainability when Kerrie and Diane and myself began to explore the concept of sustainability and how complex it was. We realized that there was a lot to manage. When we were trying to write an article, when we were trying to present, we realized that it was sometimes untangible. It was really difficult to capture the aspects and pinpoint the point of sustainability that we're looking at. Are we talking particularly about the Sustainable Development Goals? If so, which ones? Why? Are we talking about the 3 pillars or one of them in particular? And if so, why? And then we began to look, and we realized that there was something happening regarding sustainability, as Kerrie mentioned earlier, that some of the students and the settings that we began to engage with, their understanding of sustainability, if they linked it to the goals, or if they linked it to the pillars, or if they linked it to everyday life, was very disjointed. So we began to find a gap, and that's where we've been exploring how do we characterize what we do with those in practice, and how do we do it. So what does sustainable pedagogy look like to enable and support the SDGs, the 3 pillars, and to work with the intergenerational community that we're going to be engaging with?
And as I'm from Hull, I have to point out that is a Venn diagram, and they were designed at Hull. And we even have a bridge in Hull that has lots of Venn diagrams on top of it. So sorry, I had to celebrate my Hullness there as we're going forward. So this idea of how do we support, how do we encourage, how do we celebrate all these positive things that we want early years to have from sustainability. We started to look at this idea of the small steps, you know, whereabouts I am. And this was an image when we were once talking, we said, well, it's like a journey. And then we discovered actually it's not just a journey, it's a journey of reflection for us, a journey of reflection for all educators, a journey of reflection for practitioners, and a journey of reflection for the children. So whereabouts are they when it comes to the understanding of sustainability? You know, have they just arrived at the bridge to cross over? And we use this image of a bridge because often when we were talking to practitioners, they did seem to think it was something huge to take on board until we started to break it down and speak to them and say, but this happens, and do you do this, and do you do? And then they realize that actually they are a lot further down on this idea of the sustainable pedagogy bridge, that they are not at a point where they have to start to learn about it. No, they need to start to understand that they're already doing it, that they are so far. So this bridge, and we had a fun session with using AI. Angela is now the AI queen. So when she passes on her email details, if anyone wants anything AI, Angela is just the whiz of it now. She sat there typing various things in going forward. It was this idea that you can't see the end of the bridge, because with sustainability, to be sustainable, as I've already said, it's constantly having to evolve to take on board what's happening in policy, what's happening in training, what's happening in the world, whether that's human, whether that's non-human. So the image was a very deliberate one. We wanted it to look nice and calm, but also that there is no real end. It doesn't stop. You can see it moves on, so that the people that are involved in sustainable pedagogy are able to work where they are on that bridge, but also to know that it's a continual, as we do in early years. We don't believe, as Angela said, she was originally an NNEB. I originally qualified as a BTEC nursery nurse in the 90s as well. And that was not the end of my qualification. That was the start of my understanding, which has been developed over many years of practice, many years of working with practitioners. So it's this idea of sustainable pedagogy is there and accessible for everybody going forward, but also understanding how they work together, which leads to Diane, to Diane, who's going to share some of the case studies she's been involved in.
I can't move the slides. Okay, sort of like what Kerrie was talking about there was basically lifelong learning. And that links very much with where UNESCO is saying that we need to be recognizing that the children that are in our care now for early childhood, in 20 years' time, where will they be? What will the skills they need? What will the jobs be? What will the planet look like? So we sort of like have to think about the SDGs as being a tool that will, or a framework that will help us in early childhood to reflect upon what is sustainable pedagogy, but also prepare children for the future. So in this term, I've started off with SDG 4, quality education, because this is the most important one. Early childhood is not just a preparation for primary school. We need to remember that. It's when fundamental values and attitudes are developed, where sort of racism, sectarianism, biphilia, all those sort of things can be started if we don't have a quality education that is looking at and preparing children for the next century. So it's about a quality experience that immerses children in all of their environments and develops a relationship with all inhabitants. And this is really important because we have to start getting children to think about the non-human world. We need to sort of like try and move children away from the human-centric perspective that we always tend to think about, and that the human is at the top of the hierarchy. So it's moving from the ego to the eco, so that children recognize they are immersed. Remember, early childhood is about hands, head, and heart. And that in doing that, both the education child will become part of the interconnected ecological world, and therefore place-based learning. Children will love all aspects of their locality in all seasons. So it's going outside in all weathers, going to the beach when ice is coming in on the tide, recognizing that children, to understand and care about their world, they have to be immersed in it. So it's immersing children in all aspects of their community. This is a social, cultural aspect of sustainability. So Kerrie touched on intergenerational, working with all of the different intergenerational groups that are in your community, volunteers, parents, carers, grandparents. Culturally recognize the different cultures that are beyond your gates and immerse the children in them so they have that understanding of the other, ecologically and socially. But most importantly, we need quality educators who are sensitive and passionate about giving children agency to ask the questions, not as it says in the EYFS, to answer questions, and to develop those wider skills that are necessary for the 21st century. But SDG 4 cannot be achieved without SDG 3, good health and well-being. And this is the beginning of the interconnection. I'm going to try and show you, just in these few slides, the interconnection of the 17 goals. So as educators, we need to provide all the physical, emotional, cognitive and social support through quality practice, strong relationships, the intergenerational, the cultural that I've already mentioned, and allowing children to have a sense of belonging to their culture and to the community that they are part of. And this will ensure children are therefore ready and able to connect with their world and immerse themselves in challenges, investigations, and active learning. But again, the interconnection, this can only be achieved if they have a safe place to live, SDG 1, or food in their tummies, SDG 2, zero hunger. We need to give children a place of self so that they know where they fit and that they are part of an interconnected web. But again, following with that interconnection again with the SDGs, SDG 5, gender equality, SDG 10, reduced inequalities, are also integral to SDG 4, quality education, which supports the idea of a diverse community of learners, SDG 11, cities and communities, drawing on the idea of Reggio Emilia, where the child and the adult are not hierarchical, with the adult knowing all and that the child has to just absorb what the adult says. We need to be working with the children to answer their questions, to solve their problems, to help them to become the citizens for the 21st century. So as educators, we must provide a safe, because they won't ask questions if they don't feel safe, inclusive, so everybody feels valued, culturally reflective, enabling environment for all children to flourish. But in doing that, we are then supporting children's awareness and understanding of empathy to each other, so that's gender equality, to have kindness and care for others. But again, it's reflecting that human and non-human empathy as well through an ethics of care. So when we look at SDG 15 and SDG 14, which is probably with the SDGs that practitioners most feel comfortable with and familiar with, within our communities, SDG 11, we need to ensure, as I've said, about the awareness of empathy and the care for the other. And who is this other? Through quality education, we engage in pedagogical experiences which recognize both the human and non-human world. So having a safe place to live and food in tummies is not just a human priority. Human choices and actions have consequences for the planet, and we need to provide the skills so the children are empowered to fight for the other. And when I was working with in Liverpool, the children were planning what they wanted to have in their sensory garden, and they'd decided that they wanted to have a bug hotel because this was something that they'd seen and wanted to have, so that they could sort of become more immersed in the environments of the bugs and insects in their garden. And they were out in the garden with Tom, the caretaker, who was the knowledgeable other. And they were sort of really fascinated by one area of the garden that they'd identified as being a great place for the bug hotel. But in doing the observation and the research with Tom, they actually started having conversations about the worms. The worms at that point were very white and pale and lethargic. And Tom was explaining that it was because the nutrients in the soil, because it was the winter, were not very good quality. But once the spring came and the soil started to liven up again, then the worms would become bright and pink and fluffy again. And as a consequence of this conversation with Tom, the children made the decision, because this is the human choices and actions that have consequences, they decided that they weren't going to put a human-needed bug hotel onto a piece of land that was the worms' home. So they decided that that was going to stay the worms' house, the worms' soil, and they made that conscious decision to fight for the other, in this case, the worm. So when highlighting safe spaces with children, and in this case that I was just talking about was the worms, we all need to reflect upon societal concerns as well regarding net zero, carbon footprints, clean water, and alternative energy. This can be simple neighbourhood walk, identifying different energy points, wind turbines, solar panels, and chimneys. Do children really know what is a chimney's for? How many children know a chimney apart from a Father Christmas perspective? Observing the natural waterways. Are they clean? What does this mean for the non-human life living there? And also, is there flooding that is happening in your locality due to building work? And I've highlighted here SDG 6, SDG 7, SDG 8, SDG 9, and SDG 12. And all of these factors linked to the Department of Education strategy that came out in 2022-2023, which highlights the importance of, by September 2025, having a sustainability lead and a CAP, a climate action plan in place. So this is hopefully giving you some sort of idea of how you can incorporate the SDGs into a climate action plan so that you're aligning with the DFE strategy. So to conclude, this has hopefully demonstrated the interconnection of the 17 Sustainable Development Goals through early childhood education. Strong institutions, 16, reflect strong learning communities, Lave and Wenger, 1991. We need to be empowering children, SDG 4, to reflect and evaluate, to problem solve and question using the SDGs. And that then aligns with SDG 17. And I am so forward thinking that I have managed to put in an international 17, I note. So that is about partnership for the goals, if you didn't understand the language. So it's about hoping that by all coming together, we are able to reflect strong communities of learning. And that historically, which I think Kerrie mentioned earlier, through the pioneers of Montessori, Steiner, Froebel, was about children all working together. And that's what we need to do. And to use the SDGs as a tool to move forward. And finally, from myself, this is just to highlight this resource that you can use. It is a free resource, and it uses the SDGs to lead to the creation of the sustainable pedagogy. So it started off with the SDG resource, which shows all 17 of the goals, and it provides provocations. There's no learning outcomes. There's no goals in it whatsoever, because early childhood education should be about provoking children to ask questions. So the resource will provide you with lots of examples of how you can provoke an idea or an understanding or a provocation that will lead to an investigation around the SDGs. But it also led through conversations within our strategy group and within personal conversations to develop the idea of sustainable pedagogy that Kerrie was talking about earlier, recognizing that early childhood is situated in the ecological context of family, locality, the global world, and the biosystem.
Thanks, Diane. So we've just put up some pictures here. Angela's going to complete our presentation, so hopefully you can see the ideas of sustainable pedagogy, how we've got to there, how it can begin. But this was something we did for one of our conferences, that we brought up the reason that we're doing it, and it is a selfish exploitation of all the young children that I did get permission from my children for this, and we all got permission. Just to point out the reason we're doing this for going forward. But I just wanted to point out, yes, every you know, we did have permission for all of these, and I'll hand to Angela.
Yep, because sustainability is about us, what we're doing now, but it's about those that we're working with now and those who aren't born yet, those who maybe are further along the line. It's about that whole engagement, sustainability, and how are we tuning into that? How are we respecting and working with each other so that we are being sustainable? Because how we was being sustainable 10, 20, 30, 50 years ago, we have to change that. It's ever evolving and changing, as is our concept. And we have realized, looking at the tentacles of sustainability, the more we begin to try to capture it, the more we realize, as Diane was saying earlier, about the interconnectedness, and how then sometimes it can be tangible or not to be able to define sustainability and what aspect we're looking at. So to conclude, two words I'm going to just pull out for us for this maybe discussion that hopefully will open up lots of avenues for us as a group. We know that to be sustainable, we need dialogue, we need communication, we need those social engagements, and dialogic pedagogy, to listen, to hear, and then to respond authentically, completely underpin the concept of how we define sustainable pedagogy. And we also know that we use the word interconnectedness, but let's have a look at Froebel, for instance, and let's look at Froebel and his principle on unity and connectedness, that everything is connected. There's nothing silo, there's nothing that doesn't impact and belong to something else. And it's a never-ending continuous movement. I won't even open up David Boom's work yet on you know, the connected order of everything in the universe and life and quantum physics. But, you know, there's this whole other avenue that we could look at when we begin to explore energy and space and time and our understanding of what sustainability is now, how it was, but how it will be in the future. So the last word I'm going to just sum up with following on from Diane and Kerrie's points, it's about consciousness. Because one of the points is, when the pack that you've got the link there that Diane led on back nearly 5 years ago, and this pack has gone out to lots of other countries, it's seen as a real innovative idea to make sure that sustainability is more understood and more engaged with and more known. When Diane, Kerrie and I began to do some research, and we thought, oh, we'll do this pack, this is amazing, back in 2021, we realized that when we began to engage with practice, with settings, with our students, with our stakeholders, that actually when we took the pack into the practice, the goals weren't maybe as well known or engaged with as we had envisaged. And this was, you know, a good taking off your rose tinted glasses to actually see what's happening in practice. So I'm going to just finish off with the word being conscious of the connections between the SDGs, the pillars, and sustainable pedagogy, to think about how we are all engaging or not, and what can we do to support sustainability in the context that we're working, in the roles that we have. So I'm going to open it up really, and thank Diane and Kerrie for sharing their expertise and their time with us all. And now it's over to you all in the who are here with us today. What's your reaction to sustainability, to any of the points from today, and any thoughts or reactions that you would like to share with us? And thank you, Diane and Kerrie, for really sticking to time. That was amazing. I did have the ruler ready. So would anybody like to share their thoughts? I know Vicky, are you still here with us? Vicky Johnson from Scotland. I know up in the chat earlier.
Yeah, I'm
Hi,
here.
Vicky. How are you doing? Lovely to see you and have you here.
Nice to see you. I really enjoyed that. I've got a question. I was just typing it actually, because
Oh, okay.
sometimes you're not allowed to speak in these things. It's nice that you're letting us speak. Hello.
Oh, absolutely. Down
Um,
with pedagogy.
So I'm up at the University of the Highlands and Islands, and I run a centre called the Centre for Living Sustainability. So I think when I first got here, one is that sustainability was seen as quite scientific and, you know, across the sciences, and so now we've made it mean everything. But I was going to say the sustainable pedagogy, I think it's relevant across ages, actually. So I think it's really interesting that you've done it for early years, but I mean, have you had any thoughts about extending it to other ages? Because I think it's valuable to do that, even with our postgraduates and graduates actually, but also through other levels of school. So
Yeah, thanks, Vicky, for that. We used a quick example of when we've been doing intergenerational work, and certainly through the Forest School that we run through the University of Hull, we've tried this quite a lot. The image you saw there was the smallest child on the day was 20 months old, and the eldest child was my daughter, who was 16, and I can't really call her a child, and she'd be very offended, but she's not here, so no one will tell her these things. There were adults involved as well, but they were all cowards and didn't want to be on the photographs. And I can say that because there is one member actually in the audience who was an adult on that day that I know is attending. So we have looked at it. We haven't written fully about it. We've spoken about the intergenerational. I think it was Diane or Angela mentioned we've explored this idea of wisdom shepherds, so the sharing, the more knowledgeable other, whether that's intergenerational, whether that's just from experience going forward. So you're right, it is for everybody, and I think this is something to certainly celebrate, that the sustainable pedagogy is as important for the oldest person and the youngest person going forward. And that's where this idea of co-construction between the early years practitioners and the child can then lead forward into any form of education, that hopefully once the child has the confidence to know that the adult is going to truly listen and, you know, not just pretend to listen, but they will engage with what's being said. It does work for all age ranges going forward, and it's certainly something that we are exploring going further. We started with early years because, as we've explained at the beginning, that is our background, that's our passion, and that was linking to our own practice going forward. But yeah, thank you, Vicky. And I'm going to, as soon as we go on, I'm going to look at what you've put on the link that you put on earlier, with the idea.
Can I just add as well?
Yeah,
building on what Kerrie was saying, that yes, Vicky, it's a mix. We tended to also think of early childhood because it was the time when fundamental values are started. And when I first started doing sustainability, I got really frustrated by the fact that in England, whenever I went to anything, it was always from primary. It was never about early years. It was always about the primary or the junior up to secondary. But I didn't find that when I was in Scotland or in Wales or Northern Ireland. It was just from an English perspective. So it was important to me to start it in England when I first started with the resource, was to start it from an early childhood perspective. But yes, I've worked with the local infant schools in higher education, with students going into different placements with different ages and placements. But also an intergenerational community project I started in Liverpool, which was, I think, the image that you saw at the very beginning under social culture. It started off with just being as a children's centre, but then it moved into Liverpool Football Club, and it then moved into Liverpool City, and it is now an integral part of Liverpool City policy, working with dementia patients. So yes, it is for everybody, because that's the whole point of the idea of UNESCO's lifelong learning.
And just to add in there, Vicky, we're going to go for the triad here to respond. It's interesting because sustainability is sometimes really siloed. Depending on the discipline that you're working in, what we found is there aren't as many connections between, if we look at through an educational lens, for instance, early years, primary, secondary, everybody seems to be looking at it in their own silos. And for instance, there's lots of events going on, and it's quite interesting when you see that early childhood isn't involved or invited. It's kind of, it's not seen as part of it. And maybe sometimes if we're looking at it for early years, maybe are we thinking of the secondary and the primary? So there does need to be much more seismic thought as to how we make those connections in lots of different ways, those tentacles in and out. So just to respond to that point, Vicky. So I can see there's a couple of people that are, Jane, I'll come to you in a tick. I think Glenda, did you want to make a, you put on the chat about the conversations, but I didn't know if you wanted to come in there, Glenda.
No, I was just really interested in your presentations. Thank you very much. Just working with HE students as well, finding this time, the discussion about the worms and so on, that just the time to ponder and explore the world starts those sustainability conversations. And I'm finding with adult students that's really useful as well, for them to take that when they go into earlier settings, that they're seeing the value of those quite easy and simple conversations, really, that encourage that thinking about cycles of life or how we look after resources or whatever. So I think that I'm always finding that having that time is so valuable to do that at any age, really.
Kerrie, Diane, did you want to respond to Glenda?
I was just going to bring something. I just sorry, my chat keeps dropping and then coming back up. I think it was Nikita put a comment that we're not encouraged to be curious and that we don't always have the answer. And I think that links into what you were saying, that this idea, the example of the worm, we don't maybe always have an answer. If someone had asked me why are the worms, I would not have known. So it would be that, actually, yeah, let's find out. Who could we ask? And it links back to this intergenerational, that there might be someone, and it doesn't have to be intergenerational. It doesn't have to be an older person having the knowledge. It might be a child who is obsessed with worms and knows everything about worms. And when we have these certain and is listened to it and learning, and it goes back to this idea of lifelong learning. And with sustainable pedagogy, it is lifelong learning for everybody involved. So I just wanted to bring out, because I thought that was really what Nikita had put in there was really made me think that, yes, we're often embarrassed to be curious and put off from being curious. As we get older, we are expected to know everything.
I just put in SDG 11, sustainable communities, because I was in the story, I sort of said about Tom. Tom was the caretaker. So it's that auditing who is in your setting, who is in your culture, who is in beyond the gates, that you could invite in to share their knowledge. And that's what we did when we did the intergenerational program in Liverpool. We sort of brought the elderly that were a lot of the time they're sort of encouraged to be passive recipients of children dancing or reading or singing to them. But I sort of thought, well, these elders are the wisdom keepers. They're the ones that have got the knowledge that we need to share, and therefore we need to embrace who's beyond the gates and get them to come in, because they will then teach you to be curious, because you will want to know the fascinating facts about why do you need to have a pond in a garden? What do frogs do that will keep your garden strong and resilient and sustainable? And it's that sort of knowledge that not everybody has, and it's being honest and saying, I don't know the answers, but let's find out together.
Hey, thank you. I'm going to check now for hands up. Thank you so much for we really need to engage with these dialogues and to sort of see what the reactions are. And we're hoping as well, because there was about 40 of us here, we are hoping to continue this dialogue at another time. So we will send invites out for further discussions on points brought up. But I know there's 2 hands up. Kerrie, are you able to stop sharing so we can see each other? And then I can see the hands up so I do it in an order. I know I can see Jane and Tia, so I'm going to go for Tia first, if that's okay. I don't know if that's the right way around, but Tia, welcome from Georgia.
I think Jane was first.
Oh,
Yes.
okay. Okay, thank you, Tia. It's so kind of you, because when you've got the screen shared, it's really hard to see. Jane, thank you. Thanks. Hi, Jane. Welcome.
Hi. Yeah, no, thank you to the three of you for a really interesting presentation. I think, there were some really interesting points that were raised, and I think, the kind of practical application of how you work with the SDGs is really helpful, actually, because often I'm probably guilty of being potentially too philosophical or too theoretical, but I think, how can this make a difference practically on the ground is really important work. But that said, I do have a question about the philosophy and the theory. You cover a lot of ground and you engage with a lot of schools of thoughts and philosophies, and you talk about the giant philosophers. You also talk about the non-human. You also talk about children's rights. You cover an awful lot of ground, and I was kind of getting lost, if I'm honest, because there, as I'm sure, there is lots of work in these different spaces. So there's lots of post-humanist research, critical post-humanities work on environmental education, on becoming worldly, or termed in different ways, but addressing that kind of relationality between the human, non-human, space, place, history, legacy, all of those things. You also mentioned space-time mattering, which of course is Baradian, which is quantum physics. So again, we've got another layer of kind of complexity being introduced. And then there was the kind of what you were offering around children's agency, children's voice, children's rights. None of which, I don't disagree with any of this, obviously. My question is how they work together, and how you are working through, because there are fundamental and really, really sticky tensions between, the Froebel, Steiner, Montessori, whoever, the giant philosophers, as you call them, and then the critical post-humanities, indigenous worldviews, all of these things. And you just covered such a lot of ground that I feel like maybe you need to put the brakes on and say, hang on. What are we doing here? And how does it work together? And I just wondered if that was a piece of work that you are undertaking or about to undertake. Because it seemed to me there's a sort of need to situate what you're doing, because there are big sort of existing, emerging and established sort of fields of inquiry that wouldn't necessarily term themselves sustainability or environmental education, but that have been dealing with these issues in early childhood and childhood more generally, and education more generally. So just how are you proposing to situate yourself and make those kind of robust connections was the stuff that was kind of whizzing around my head. But this is obviously a sign of a really good provoking presentation, because it's got me thinking about all these places that you go.
Okay, thanks, James. Do you want me to pop in, Diane, or Kerrie? Are you going? Does anybody?
You can start, and then I'll
Okay,
follow.
yeah, thanks, Jane. Well, firstly, it's great that you've been provoked. Our job here is done. If we've provoked anybody today, that's the whole idea of it. Secondly, is it the chicken or the egg? Is it theory or practice? And again, if it's practice, what aspects of practice when we look at sustainability? Is it the technical? Is it the structures? Is it the infrastructures? Is it the resources? If it's theoretical, which discipline, which theorist, how are we going to manage it? And one of the first points that we shared today was the complexities of when you look into the concept of sustainability. It's huge, it's vast, it's owned by everybody, which we underpinned what we were looking at when we talked about unity, connectedness. And again, there's so many theorists that have that own and link to that. And again, so what we did is we began to look at what was happening in practice. We've got the concept of sustainability. We have our theoretical underpinning, of course, but we wanted to have a look what's actually happening in practice, and we're being driven by that. So the theoretical side of it links, but we're looking at actually what's happening in the real world at the moment, what's happening with children, with families, with practitioners in early years. and we're using language, we're using technical aspects that our practitioners and our stakeholders and our students can use in practice in real world situations. Of course, we want to get the theoretical side established, we want to get it moved forward, but we'll do that as our concepts evolve. And from where we started 5 years ago to where we are now, the concept of sustainability continues to change, but what hasn't changed is our rights-based underpinning for it, and our child-centred and our dialogic pedagogy. They're kind of been really static. So I don't know, Diane and Kerrie, if you want to come in to respond to Jane there before we move on to Taya.
Yeah, I just think, thank you for that, Jane. And as Angela says, if you've been provoked, that's the whole point. That's the word I use, is about provoking. And it's also about interconnection and about holism, and about that there isn't one particular silo to look at, one subject or one discipline. It's about everything, and that everybody has to come from it from the perspective that they are, that's their strengths. I think there's a few people that have put in the comments about the fact that practitioners are not equipped to address things and that they don't have the knowledge. And so when we were sort of like starting it, it was very much about how can we help people who are on the ground to start to make that journey. And that obviously you might start off crossing the bridge or to make the journey, and that you might have one particular strength or one particular interest, but at the end of it, Jane, you might be absolutely wrapped up with going down one of the paths that you talked about, and that being your main focus. But I just sort of like think, do we need to have to say it's just going to be this or it's just going to be that? I would be saying the wonderfulness of the interconnectedness of everything that makes the planet and the world, and therefore sustainability. I don't know whether that's the answer you want to hear.
No,
whether I'm not answering your question or not.
I'm not in search of the right answer. I'm just posing. Maybe I'm provoking you, actually.
Yeah, that you are.
To think about how these different theoretical orientations, they do different work, and often they're not just about generative interconnections. They're about that they're pursuing completely different agendas, and so they're often working against each other. So I think that, you know, there is some care that needs to be taken to when you bring Berard together with Froebel, together with, you know, Haraway or whoever, and the SDGs, and, you know, they're coming from very different political orientations. They pursue very different agendas, and so when you're bringing them together, and I also think that, you know, theory and practice are not separate. They can never be separate. So it's that you say, okay, here's the practice, and then I'll come up the rear with some theory. That's not how, you know. And of course, there's Hilary Lenz-Taguchi's thing about the theory practice divide in early childhood. So these debates have been going on for a long time.
The sticky knots of Haraway, that type of thing. Yes,
exactly. So it's just, I suppose, just sitting with the trouble, staying with the trouble of Haraway about when these things are in tension and when they start to unravel. And it's not that everything just is together and in this sort of happy mix. Actually, there are some problematics. And I guess that's kind of what I was pushing you to. When you encounter a problematic, you know, what do you do, and how does theory help you with that? You know, to conceptualize and to move on, and therefore move practice on. So I guess, it was just a kind of critical engagement and an acknowledgement that these things don't always and often don't work together.
Yeah, well, when worlds collide, yes. Kerrie, did you want to add anything?
I was just going to say, as we was talking, it reminded me, and I can see Naomi, there's something that myself, Angela and Naomi presented, this idea of the wicked problems. And what we did today was try to show the journey we've made to get to this point, and we've produced with different areas. So we've got looking at the giants, we've got looking at theory, we've got looking at the policy, and it's this, you know, we've spoke about how they are very complex, they are interrelated and interconnected. We don't mean that they get on. You know, it's like any type of a relationship, doesn't always get on going forward. And we are very much aware of the wicked problems, and this is the various, I mean, I'm not going to stand here and go, oh, so please read our books and that type of thing, but that is the idea that we have these different theoreticals bringing forward. And again, the kind of argument is that depending on what training a practitioner has had, they may have understanding of different things. They may have been trained in Froebel, they may have been trained in Montessori, they may have been trained to just follow the EYFS. So these are all of the wiki problems that we are coming across all the time, that we start to explore, and that we hope to, like you say, we're never going to answer them. You're right, Jane. There's never going to be a definitive answer. You know, it's not Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. We've not got a definitive answer right at the end. It's the journey that will be continually evolving as everybody's research starts to go together. But you know, and it is certainly something that we think about, that how everything isn't nice, the sticky knot, the wiki problem, whatever you want to call it. And it is this constant argument when you work with practitioners who are involved in any form of training, is how do we get them to question the big wicked problems that we're mentioning, but also the wicked problems of what's happening to them in their locality, what's going forward. And it's this idea of the self-reflection and the I can't think of the word, the kind of giving them the information that they can keep in the back pocket to bring forward to support going forward. But you're right, Jane, there's so much there, and that was kind of what we wanted to do today, to say to everybody how there's so much there, and it's never going to live in harmony regardless, because you know what we're looking at and what's happening in the world. So but no, thank you.
Okay, thanks, Kerrie. Thanks, Jane, for provocation. But before we move on to Tia, I know she wanted to come in, but I just want to say, theory doesn't only move us on in practice. Practice moves us on from observing, researching and learning. So there's this circle and cycle which all of us here are part of. So we're working together on that. But Tia, I hope I haven't missed you. I hope you're still with us. Would you like to?
Yes.
Oh, fabulous. Welcome from Georgia.
Thank you very much. Thank you, everyone, for this opportunity. Very interesting seminar. And I know that the time is like going to the end of the seminar, so I will try to be very short. And thank you again for exploring like this relatively new concept of sustainability in education. It is truly very important to expand our knowledge and experience and research in this area, and moving beyond the only ecological or environmental issues to view sustainability as a concept of continuity and interconnectedness, of course. And my question is, I'm sorry in advance if it's very much focused or detailed to this, my question, but I'm really interested how you perceive the ASDG 10, I mean equity. How do you perceive its role in education? Is it about education as a tool to reduce social and economic inequalities, or do you perceive it as like focused more on ensuring equity in accessibility to quality education? Or is it interconnected again to each other? Thank you.
Diane, are you okay to come in on this one?
I was just writing it. It was just basically it's about providing the interconnection for all. I think on one of the slides it said, you know, you can't do SDG 4 without doing SDG 3, 5 and 10, and that's about ensuring that sort of every single child culture aspect of their life is embedded into the practice that you provide for them, so that as the old sayings used to say, you know, no child is left behind. But that is what education is about. It's supposed to be about reducing inequalities, and the inequality of them also, and I will say it from a human perspective, i.e. that we tend to, education is always about the human-centric perspective. And the story of the worms was the fact that I was trying to sort of like show how children are very capable of looking from an egocentric perspective. And is it that the adult and the education system that we have that moves us away from that and makes us more focused on things that are relative to humans and human need? And therefore reduced inequalities to me was human and non-human, so that the children start to think, hang on a minute, where's our place in, where's this, you know, if you've got a flooding in an area, that they actually stop to think, well, who's living in this area that's become flooded? Who is this impacting? In the same way as I'm just about to do something around homelessness, you know, like children being aware that there are people who have got less things than they might have, and that they are asking these critical and sensitive questions. I don't know if that answers your question, Tia, or helps you, but Kerrie, Angela?
Yeah, I'm just going to come in there because we're just coming to the end of our session. We've got a minute over. So I'm just going to share with you, Tia, because we're going to send out an email to meet up again to discuss this. So we're hoping that we can continue to answer. But I guess one of the things about SDG 10, and we're looking at equity within education, this is why we looked at the concept of sustainable pedagogy. We looked at what are we doing to be equitable, and then it links to inclusion, it links to diversity and culture, and then moving in context, and pedagogically, how are we engaging with that? But also technically, there are aspects to look at regarding SDG 10. So it's just the pedagogy, the technicality, and it's also the resourcing. So I'll stop there and leave you wanting more, hopefully, Taya. And I would just like to thank our guest speakers today, Dr. Diane Boyd, Kerrie Lee, and myself. I'll take a little bit of a double chair in the presentation, but I'd like to thank all of you for giving your time up today, and for everybody that's contributed to the dialogue, to the discussion and the provocations, which is just wonderful, which is just what we were hoping for. And we would like to maybe within the next month have another meeting on this, to continue from the points that you've raised, so we can kind of take it forward, because sustainability is about moving forward. So we want to kind of take and embrace that concept. So massive thank you. The recording will be up on our Childhood and Society SIG at Middlesex shortly for you. And we look forward to working and meeting you all again. So thanks to everybody for your time today and for being with us, and happy sustainability.
So much.